What is up, guys? Aldo here. I'm in Miami and enjoying that Miami summer. Was up north in Connecticut for a lot of July, and that was a lot of fun. The New England summer is nice. I would have to say probably New England summer versus Miami summer. New England summer a little bit better. Oh man, it's hot in Miami. Well, hot everywhere, but you know, always the winter months are always, the fall and winter months are always the nicest in Florida typically. Anyway, you guys probably don't care too much about that. What I want to talk about in this video is self-sabotage, and how that could really, hinder your success a lot, hinder the things you're trying to accomplish. And if you ever wondered, you ever been in a position where you're doing so well, maybe, everything was going perfectly, everything was going well, and then you made maybe such a careless mistake. Now, why does that happen a lot of times? What causes that to happen? That's self-sabotage, and I think that's programming. That's your kind of your subconscious mind. You have your thinking mind, your conscious mind, and your conscious mind probably knows what to do because it's done it a lot. But your subconscious mind, that's what's in control. That's what makes you make the decision. So a lot of times, you may make a careless error, stupid decision. You may just mess up when you were so close to getting what you wanted to do. Maybe you're so close to succeeding, getting what you wanted, and then you make such a careless error and you mess it all up or whatever. It happens. Don't feel bad. It happens. It happens to all of us. But what I think that is especially when you're like, what was it afterwards? You're like, what was I thinking? What was I thinking? I was the other day I was reading about Phil Mickelson, the golfer, professional golfer, and I know, I forget the exact details of it, but anyway, he was about to win or something, and on the last hole he made it way too risky. He took such a risky shot for no logical reason and screwed up and double bogeyed the hole. And afterwards he was just like, what was I thinking? He's like, I'm such an idiot. What was I thinking? That could be kind of the subconscious. The conscious knew what to do. The conscious knew, how to win. I don't know the exact, I got to read more about the, what that exact, thing was. The conscious knew, he knew what to do. His conscious mind, it was A and B. You didn't need, you didn't need to be a genius to know what to do in the situation. And people would say, well, maybe he was overthinking, all that. Yeah, sure, that's definitely possible, I think. But what I really think it is that subconscious, you're kind of programmed. That's your programming. Maybe, people say brainwashing. That's how you're kind of programmed in a lot of ways. You may get really far at something, and then towards the end, you may make that careless mistake. I know a lot of people have talked about this. A lot of smart people have talked about this. And, deep down, I feel like, it's like maybe you're trying to make that investment, make that trade, start that business, do that thing, and then you make careless mistakes in it. You make careless kind of mistakes, things that you should have known better, things that you've studied and you knew better, but it's kind of just that self-sabotage because maybe your subconscious isn't programmed. You didn't have that programming where you believed you deserved to win, you believed you deserved, all of these things. That's what it kind of gets into. And now, how do we fix that? Let's talk about solutions. I know in some of these videos I don't talk about solutions a lot, and that's actually a kind of a trend I see in self-improvement. A lot of people, they talk about all the issues and they don't talk enough about solutions. We need to be talking about solutions more. And ultimately, it's visualization. Whether or not you're a believer in those meditations. That's how you kind of change. I know Naval Ravikant said on Tim Ferriss's podcast, I was re-listening to that. I was re-listening to that when I was driving back down to Florida, and he was saying that when you're meditating, your life could change. You start different relationships, you embark on different things. It it ultimately changes. Ray Dalio too, he said that was one of the biggest things in terms of his success. He meditated, 20 minutes every morning, 20 minutes before he went to sleep. And that's easier said than done. It's ever, you probably think, I know anybody could just sit there for 20 minutes, 40 minutes a day and do nothing. It's simple. It is, but at the same time, it kind of isn't. And at the same time, it's like, you may know, it's like what I was just talking about earlier. You may know what you were supposed to do. You may know what you were supposed to do, and then you didn't do it. Why? Because that's that subconscious kind of programming. So subconscious is the one in control. And I know the big analogy that Dr. Bruce Lipton always uses to talk about this is, when you're driving, when you first start learning to drive, it's really hard. You got to remember all these things, but then once you get the hang of it, it's all subconscious. It all just comes naturally. You're kind of zoning out while you're driving sometimes. You know what I mean? You're kind of just zoning out. You're doing it correctly without even really paying attention too much. That's kind of how it is, and then once you get that programming, there's a lot of times where I was thinking, like, why did I do that? I would I'd make a careless mistake, mess something up, and I would be like, why did I do that? I don't understand. I knew better. Like, I knew exactly what I should have done, and it was something I could have practiced, many times before, kind of, and you still messed it up. But why? That's kind of the subconscious, kind of programming. So a lot of people say, you can listen to positive affirmations as you go to sleep, the theta brainwaves. I think that's true. I mean, it's obviously pseudoscience, but I think that's true. I think that's the way to do it. And obviously, Neville Goddard, one of the biggest names in the law of attraction, said, feeling is the secret. You got to feel like you have achieved it, and then it will come. And that's what seems like what happens, in life. You feel, you get the things that you kind of feel like you deserve. You get that it's on the vibration, the frequency, that you're on. That's ultimately, what happens a lot of times. That's how life works a lot of times, ultimately. Let me walk back this way. We're kind of cut off with a fence here. But ultimately, that's one of the biggest things. And, it could get very frustrating. It could get very, unmotivating if you keep if you're plateauing, if you're not, building, if you're not, really, expanding and improving. But don't fret, because one of the things too that I think I've learned is you got to just keep trying. As cliche as it is, don't give up. Just keep trying. And if one path doesn't seem to work and you're losing interest in it and it doesn't excite you anymore, try something else. I think Jordan Peterson said one time, a lot of people, they don't know what they want to do. Well, just try something, just try something new. And you want to find things that kind of excite you, really excite you. And if you don't really know what excites you, go on YouTube, go on these things and find videos that kind of excite you and try to, maybe that could find some of your interest. I'm not even going to say examples, because there's just so many different things, but ultimately, what I want to kind of turn this conversation to is, how one of the biggest things I've learned from Andrew Kirby, who's another good name to listen to. I've absorbed and watched a lot of content over the years, and I think for the most part it's helped me. You gotta actually listen to it. Some of these videos, I'm just zoning out half the time. It's kind of that focus. Stillness is the key. Like that book by Ryan Holiday. I read that book a while ago. I don't really remember it too much. Probably should read it again. But stillness, that kind of focus, that stillness is very important, especially in our society, especially in our lives with all the technology and everything. There's always that constant dopamine that hit that you could get. It's so easy nowadays to kind of get that. With the iPhones, Apple Watch. There's just so many things. A lot of people on Twitter hate on the Apple Watches. I'm kind of indifferent on it. I like it for telling time and like my heart rate and doing like the timer and stuff like that. That's kind of the good part of it. But I see where some people are coming from with it. I get the criticisms. But ultimately, Andrew Kirby said, a lot of people made a lot of money solving their own problems. He talked about Airbnb, how the guys that started Airbnb, they basically needed more money, so they rented out, I don't know, their apartment or their condo or their house or something and let people kind of like sleep on the couches or whatever. And that's how that business model started. Solving your own problems, make content, and do this with leverage at scale. That's how you make money. And I don't want to give examples because there's just so many different, kind of some loud music from those yachts over there. But there's just so many different paths and so many different avenues you could go on. Like, for example, like I know a lot of people that have, had passions in meaningful things that they definitely could have started businesses in and made money with. People had big talents in that, For example, I knew somebody who was incredible at golf, just like an incredible. It was like somebody who would shoot under par. Like, I mean, I'm not going to tell you could definitely win the PGA Tour, but if you're so passionate, so excited about something like that, so good at something like that you spend a lot of time on, and it seems unlikely to make any money with it, I think you still can, because you could probably start a business kind of around it, maybe have a different perspective on it, a different way you do it that nobody really does it, you know what I mean? And we're all I think we doubt ourselves in terms of how creative we are. Bob Proctor says we're all very creative, and even now with the AI and stuff, you're kind of thinking, what can I, it's hard to compete against all this. I think it's not. I think that's kind of just a distraction. We're all creative, and we all have a certain thing. We all have a certain thing that we could kind of, have a passion to work on a lot, and if we could just, use leverage, and internet is permissionless leverage, use leverage for that, and ultimately we can thrive. That's what I think. That's what I think is ultimately kind of what's going to happen here. I mean, it's an interesting time, but it's always an interesting time. And the longer you live, the more I know Andrew Kirby talked about, there's one theory where it's like the more time goes on, just the crazier things kind of get. And it could be true. Definitely could be true. Like the longer you live, I feel like the less, things kind of surprise you. The less things kind of surprise you, because the more you're used to, the more you've kind of seen. And every year you live theoretically goes by faster than the previous one. The reason for that is because your perspective is different. When you're 10 years old, your perspective of life, you haven't been around that long. Your perspective of life, like, it feels longer to you. But when you've been around a long time, you're more used to it. So it just feels like the same thing, kind of. You've experienced more. And yeah, it's interesting. It's ultimately very, very interesting. But I think at the end of the day, really, you got to just realize with your thoughts, like, you are not, I feel like we all deal with like negative thoughts. We all deal with fear of failure. We all deal with worries. We all deal with anxiety and all of those things, just to a lesser or more extent, depending on who you are. And I think you got to realize, like, you are not those negative thoughts. That's not you. Like, those are just thoughts. Those mean nothing, and you could change them. And, I've read lots of books about, law of attraction, lots of books about, your subconscious mind and all that. And ultimately, if you really desire something, you really think about it, and it has to really, I think that the most important thing is, like, the thing you want has to kind of excite you. Like, you have to kind of feel excited. It has to be like, and that could change. Maybe you succeeded at one thing, you had one business that used to excite you, and now you're kind of like done with, it doesn't really excite you anymore. You're kind of, it doesn't have the enthusiasm. You don't have the enthusiasm for it, but there's something else. You just got to keep trying. Something else that may excite you, and then you could put a lot of effort into that and really, really improve upon that. And it's a lot of trial and error. I mean, there were a lot of things I tried that I ended up quitting, that I didn't kind of follow through on, because I realized I didn't really, have that passion for them. I didn't like them as much. So that's kind of what happens. It's ultimately what happens a lot of times. Like, it's just so many different avenues you could go on. And the thing too, like, when you talk about quantum physics and you talk about, it's just crazy too, with like all the technology and all the things, you talk about different dimensions, and there's just infinite possibilities. There's every possibility you could kind of imagine. And that's possibilities of you succeeding at everything, possibilities of you failing at everything. The naysayers would probably say, oh, it's, the negative one's going to happen. And, I mean, even if it is, like, it's not really going to help you too much with that negativity. You got to have kind of the main positivity and kind of the excitement. And I know Professor Galloway, who I definitely don't agree with everything on, he's kind of blown up in recent months to a certain extent. He said IQ level, it's good to be a bit above average, but if you're too high of an IQ, you're just going to start overthinking everything. And I do see where he's absolutely, because if you overthink everything, you're just going to start thinking about the ways, like, it may not work out. You want to be kind of like risky in certain aspects. I kind of feel like you want to kind of be that risky, because those people that take the biggest risks are the ones that get the biggest reward. I mean, anyone who's like too risk averse, you're not going to have that reward. A lot of the most successful people, they risked a lot. And I'm not even saying that you should do that. Like, I don't know. I don't have all the answers. It's hard to ultimately say, but I feel like from what I've seen and what I've experienced, the more that you visualize and be excited for something, the more something excites you, the more it's something you go after that excites you, and the more you think about it, the more likely, there's no promises, nothing's ever guaranteed, but the more likely that it probably will happen, the more likely that you will probably end up getting your desires, end up getting what you want. I mean, the thing here is, like, we live in a world where, and this is like what I'm about to say, this is how it's always been. I mean, it even talks about this in the Bible, the Matthew effect. To those who have, more will be given. To those who don't have, the little that they do have will be taken away. And it depends how you interpret that. I mean, obviously, some people would interpret that in a very negative way and say, that's kind of how it's been. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer, yada, yada, yada. But you could kind of view it as, to those who have. And it also talks about, in the Bible, the feeling. You pray for something, you feel like you already have it, more likely it'll come to you. It's kind of at your command. You have that ultimate power. You're stronger than you think you are. I think a lot of us are raised to believe that, we don't really have any power. We're not really in control of our destiny. There's some other force that's controlling it. And that's ultimately not true. We're in control of it, but we're kind of self-sabotaging a lot because we just don't think that, you could have that success. Especially if you have, some success and it feels more surreal to you, it doesn't feel natural to you, I feel like that could be somewhat of an issue. If it feels really surreal, I mean, that's a good thing, but at the same time, if it feels really surreal, then I feel like your subconscious is going to try to bring you back to the baseline, back to where you kind of were. It's all about our paradigm, it's all about what you believe. I mean, that's kind of the reason. I mean, I think the number one indicator overall, and don't let it depress you, like the number one indicator overall of how success, income you're going to have is what zip code you grew up in. So what does that tell you? That ultimately tells you it's kind of the people that you surround yourself with. There's two different ways to look at this. Some people would view it, negatively, where it's like, oh, I grew up in the wrong zip code, so I can't have any success. Other people would view it positively. But it's good. I could just surround myself with better people, And ultimately, you shouldn't take things too seriously. I mean, we all make mistakes. We all self-sabotage. We all, do things that we wish we didn't. We all have kind of, regrets, and that's ultimately all right. You just got to try to learn from it. You got to ultimately try to learn from it and try to just, hone down new things. And the thing too, when you do have success, especially if you, didn't come from, the most successful family or the most successful background, is you probably along the way had a lot of naysayers, a lot of people telling you that you would never be able to succeed, all that type of stuff. And when you do succeed, then it probably could give you a lot of arrogance. It probably could give you a lot of arrogance because you're like, everybody was wrong and I was right. But that doesn't mean that everybody's wrong about everything and you're right about everything. You know what I mean? Because that's impossible. Nobody's right about everything. You know what I mean? Just some people are more right than others about certain things. It's a whole kind of spectrum like that. And that could, make you a little bit too egotistical. You get too full of yourself. And then, you ultimately may self-sabotage with that kind of, or just may not be putting in the same effort. A lot of people, they have some success, like maybe they're working out a lot, they get in better shape, and then they kind of let it go, but they kind of get lazy, they get comfortable with that, and they kind of give up and stop. You always need to be, kind of working hard towards it. And it shouldn't be, when I say working hard, like there's different views of that. Like it shouldn't really, like think about it this way. It's hard enough to kind of stay consistent with things that you're passionate about, things that excite you. It's hard enough to kind of stay passionate about, things like, stay consistent with things like that. If you're working on things that are very monotonous, things that you have no passion for, that you're just trying to, get by to, earn $1 here, earn a living or whatever. I mean, I'm not saying that's bad, but I'm saying that that's not ultimately, it's going to be very, very, like I remember a lot of times in my life, like there were things that I was competent in doing, but they made me miserable. You know what I mean? They made me kind of miserable, and I really didn't want to, keep doing that. I didn't want to keep going down that path. And unfortunately, I think that's kind of how it is for a lot of people. But I think it doesn't have to be like that, because they kind of sell themselves short in a lot of ways. Like, they may have been told, from a young age, that's how it's got to be. You got to do, a job that you don't like, all of this type of stuff, which, it's all programming at the end of the day. That's kind of how it is. And you can ultimately change your programming. Like I mentioned, meditation, positive affirmations while you sleep. Those are good things. There's a lot of ones on YouTube. I make some of my own and share them with you guys. Potentially, I think that could be very helpful, especially writing down your goals. I mean, a lot of stuff that it talks about in the book, Think and Grow Rich, by Napoleon Hill, common stuff like that. You'd be surprised how far it could go. But I'm trying to think what I said, what I was talking about before this, what kind of, brought me onto this, kind of lost my train of thought a little bit. And it's a jet going over right now. But yeah, I think that's kind of what I want to leave you guys off with here. I hope you got something out of this video. I'm always trying to, ultimately people doing job, especially everybody, from a young age who always kind of dread having to wake up on Monday morning and, go to school or go to the job that you don't like. And I don't think it really has to be like that. And that's the thing too, like, a lot of wealthier families, they're able to send their kids to like schools that they actually kind of enjoy going to. It's done in a different way. I remember one time when I was playing golf when I was like in high school with some of my friends, and they were like, "Man, you're pretty good at this. You should have went to like some school where they do golf or whatever." And I didn't even know that existed. You know what I mean? Some high school that specialized in that or whatever. We could live away, and I didn't even know those possibilities existed. Like, I didn't even know. I mean, there were other, like, I remember when I was in college, there were kids that told me, like, when they were in high school, they studied abroad, like in Spain. I was like, what? You know what I mean? Like, it was things that were so outside of the realm of, what I thought was even possible. So I think ultimately, thinking that the things you want are possible, thinking the things you desire are actually possible, that's going to help you along the way. So that's why I'm going to leave you off right now. If you guys enjoyed the video, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. Have a good one, guys. Bye.